Good afternoon and a hearty welcome to revered participants on day 2nd of International Workshop on Language Translation Skills. As it's Sunday today, therefore only one technical session is planned for the day, and our expert resource person for today is Professor Aijaz from Department of Linguistics, University of Kashmir. He has done his PhD from Aligarh Muslim University and has also served there as a faculty member for 2 years. He's also served as Regional Director for Kashmir Valley for the project Urdu Ke Ilakai Roop. He's published extensively on sociolinguistics, media linguistics, translation stylistics, discourse analysis, etc. He publishes in English, Kashmiri, and Urdu languages. Some of his publications include News Media Discourse, Issues and Perspectives, a cross-gender study of greetings, etc. So now I request Professor Aijaz to take over for his technical session. Over to you, sir.
Let me start my presentation, and at the outset, let me thank the organizers of the program to provide me an opportunity to participate in this program. Everybody knows that translation has played a huge role in the transmission of knowledge and growth of human civilization, and its significance has increased manifold in this global world. And as such, it is a pleasure to learn that the newly approved and laid out national education policy has rightly focused on the discipline of translation and has recommended the establishment of Indian Institute of Translation and Interpretation. It is a very welcome step and will surely go a long way in promoting and development of the Indian languages in this multilingual rich country. Given this backdrop, the organizers of the seminar, the Higher Education Department of Jammu and Kashmir, the Worthy Commissioner Secretary, Mr. Talat Saab, Professor Yasin Saab, Professor Rashu, Dr. Mohit, and other members of the team, and the National Translation Mission, Dr. Tariq and his team, for organizing this workshop at a very appropriate time. Without taking much of your time, let me go to my topic directly, which is linguistic theories of translation. And translation, it is an important field of applied linguistics. Applied linguistics means that where you apply the theories, the rules, the regulations, the insights of translation in a different field. And for that matter, linguistics has played a significant role in the theorizing and development of this discipline of translation studies. And many theories have been given for the, in this discipline of translation, and they can be categorized into different, but you see, when we translate, we have got many issues crop up in front of the translators, and to cope with those issues, to cope with those problems, and how to do translation in a very superb way, different theories come up, and there is always a need of translation theory. And I will quote a very pioneering figure in translation studies, Peter Newmark, who says that, I quote, "Translation theory's main concern is to determine appropriate translation methods for the widest possible range of texts or text categories. Further, it provides a framework of principles, restricted rules, and hints for translating texts and criticizing translations, a background for problem solving," unquote. And I forgot to apologize to the audience and to Professor Rashu for the technical snag. Let me tell you, I had to travel to some other place to one of my relatives to get myself connected, and I hope it will work now smoothly. And as I said right in the beginning, you have got persons, you have got scholars from philosophy, psychology, literature, linguistics, who have been dealing with the problems of translation. So you find a plethora of theories which have been given by scholars belonging to different backgrounds, and you can uh, divide them, categorize them on the basis of the approaches into different, you can say, categories. You have got the philological approach, you have got the functional approach, you have got the cultural approach, you have got the post-colonial theory and practice of translation, and then the linguistic approach. And why linguistics, you can say, in translation or linguistic theories of translation. I am aware that there are people who somehow deny that linguistics has not any role in translation, but since the subject of study for linguistics is language, and there are languages involved in translation, the source language and the target language. As such, I'm sure and everybody will agree that linguistics has a definite role to play as far as the discipline of translation is concerned. And I will quote uh, J.C. Catford when he says, quote, "Since translation involves languages, the analysis and description of translation process must draw upon a theory of language, a general linguistic theory," unquote. And another theoretician, Mona Becker, she is more appropriate when he says, I quote, "Linguistics is a discipline which studies language both in its own right and as a tool for generating meanings. It should therefore have a great deal to offer to translation studies. It can certainly offer translators and interpreters valuable insights into the nature and function of language," unquote. And there are many theoreticians as far as linguistic theories are concerned, starting with Roman Jakobson, then you have got J.C. Catford, Eugene Naida, Peter Newmark, Ivan Zott, Minai Kohler, and Basil Hatham. Many people are there, but it will be difficult given the paucity of time to cover each and everybody. I will try to cover 2 or 3 theories which have been the basic ones as far as linguistic theories of translation are concerned. And I will start with the one which I believe was the first one, you can say, although Jakobson had talked about translation, he had given his insights. You can take his theory also, but I will start with J.C. Catford, because he came up with his book, A Linguistic Theory of Translation. The name of the book is itself A Linguistic Theory of Translation, in which he dealt with the field of translation from a linguistic perspective. He was a prominent scholar, and he developed his theory on the basis of famous British linguist Mac Halliday's systemic functional grammar. Now, Catford's definition of translation is, quote, "Translation is the replacement of textual material in one language by equivalent textual material in another language." Now, there are 2 terms which I would like to highlight. One is text, and then the equivalence. Now, text for Catford, it is composed of grammatical, lexical, phonological, and graphological material. So all together, when you say the phonological level, the morphological, the syntactic, which he has taken as grammatical, then the lexical levels, they give you what you can say that they give you the text. And then equivalence, what he means by equivalence, that both the texts in the source language as well as the target language, they should communicate the same message. The message should be communicated in an appropriate manner. And when we talk about equivalence, definitely meaning comes into play. That is, the translator has to interpret the meaning of the source language text and then to, you can say, transport it into the target language. And then he makes a differentiation when he talks about meaning in the substitution of target language meanings and transference of source language meanings. He gives, you can say, focus on the substitution of target language meanings. In this regard, he says, I quote him, "In translation, there is a substitution of target language meanings for SL meanings or source language meanings, not transference of the source language meanings into the target language." Then he has given categorized translation depending on different levels. He has categorized translation into different categories on the basis of extent, level, and rank. 6 types, and I'm going to discuss them because they are important when a translator wants to translate. He should keep in mind these sort of types or these levels when he's translating from the source language into the target language. And on the basis of extent, Catford categorize translation into full versus partial translation. As I said, on the basis of the extent, that means you have got the text with you, whatever it is. Text can range from a word, it can be a sentence, it can be a para, it can be a whole book, it can be a whole library, depending on what you are translating. So what he says that in terms of the extent of translation, he says that the level you have to translate. If you translate from A to Z, if you translate the whole text without leaving even one word, you are doing what he calls as full translation. While as in partial translation, at least you can say some of the text is left untranslated, or if not anything, at least one word is left untranslated. That is, that word is taken from the source language. And I will give one example. For example, I will give a sentence. Let me take that as my text. Give me your book. This is my text. I have to translate it into, for example, Urdu or Hindi. When I translate it like this, give me your book. Mujhe apni kitab do. Give me your book. Mujhe apni kitab do. So I'm not leaving any word untranslated. So this is what he calls as, Catford calls as full translation. Now, if I translate it like this, mujhe apni book do, I have not translated the word kitab. I have taken the word book, as we do in code mixing. It is, you can say we do in code mixing when we mix words from other languages. So what I am doing here, this is what he calls as the partial translation. That is, in partial translation, some portion of the source language text is left untranslated. Then on the basis of the level, he differentiates the translation into total versus restricted translation. Total versus restricted. And the total translation, it involves the replacement of source language grammar. Remember, source language grammar and lexis by equivalent target language grammar and lexis. Now there are 4 levels, as I said. You have got the grammar, you have got the lexis, then you have got the phonology, and you have got the graphology script. So in total translation, no level is left. You have to take all the levels into consideration. So what he says, he defines the total translation as, total translation involves the replacement of the source language grammar and lexis by equivalent target language grammar and lexis with consequential replacement of source language phonology and graphology by non-equivalent target language phonology and graphology. Now, non-equivalent target language phonology and graphology, why? Because the phonology and the script of the 2 languages, source language and target language, may be different. As the example which I quoted, you see, mujhe apni kitab do, give me your book. The phonology of the Urdu language and English and the graphology script, both, they are totally different, but they are in, you can say, they are non-equivalent. And in restricted translation, what he says, that the source language textual material is replaced by equivalent target language textual material at only one level. Not all the levels are involved. That's why it says it is restricted. And for example, primary example of this type of translation is graphological translation, in which you simply, what we also call as transliteration. For example, same example, give me your book. If I write it in Devanagari script, I'm not going to change. I'm not saying mujhe apni kitab do, that I'm leaving. I'm writing the same sentence, same text, give me your book. I'm writing it in Devanagari, or I may write in Urdu or Kashmiri in the Perso-Arabic script. That will be what he calls as the unrestricted translation. Then on the level of rank, he classifies translation into rank bound and unbounded translation. Rank bound, he talks about the rank. By rank, he means a unit, whatever it is. Unit you can take when you are translating from one language into another, from the source language into target language. You take one unit for translation. You may select a word, you may select a phrase, you may go up to the sentence level. So what unit you are selecting, that is what he meant by the rank. Now in rank bound translation, selection of equivalent texts are restricted to one rank in the hierarchy of grammatical units. For example, word for word, it is very, you can say, primary example of this rank-bound translation. Here, you forget about the grammar, you forget about other things, you forget about the word order, you simply go word by word. Same text, what I have said, I will repeat it again. Give me your book. If I am translating it word for word, I'm taking now here word as the rank, I'm taking word as the level. Now see how the rank bound translation will go. It will be give me your book, give do me mujhe your tumhari book kitab. Now I am not changing, I'm not saying, I'm now the word for word translation is do mujhe tumhari kitab. I'm not I will just come to that. Now unbounded translation, on the other hand, it is not bound by any rank. The translator, he shifts from one rank to another. He does not limit himself to one unit. He does not limit himself to one rank only in the hierarchy. So same sentence, if now I do it like this, give me your book, without following any rank, I will say, mujhe apni kitab do. Mujhe apni kitab do. Remember, in word for word, I had taken your, we said, tumhari. Give me your book. Mujhe do tumhari kitab. Now here it is mujhe apni kitab do. I am not following the rank, and mostly it is the free translation which you can say this is the unbounded translation. Then one of the, as we discussed right in the beginning, I had told that equivalence, he has talked about equivalence. Now he differentiates between formal correspondence and textual equivalence. Textual equivalence is mostly concerned with the message, while as at the textual level, as I said, at that time, text consists of grammar, phonology, morphology, and lexemes. And the formal correspondence, it mostly is related to the form, it is related to the structure. Now he makes a distinction between this. How he defines formal correspondence is, I quote him, any target language category. By category, then he says unit, class, or structure. Any target language category which can be said to occupy as nearly as possible the same place in the economy of the target language as the source language given category occupies in the source language. Now, it implies here that if you have a text, for example, ladka, if you have the noun ladka, it should have the same place in English as the translated version boy. That means boy should have the same place as noun which ladka has in Urdu or Hindi. Now, another example I will say, for example, khoobsurat ladka. Now we can translate it into English as handsome boy. That there is again the formal correspondence is here. The khoobsurat ladka, you see the ladka is noun and it is modified and it is preceded by the adjective khoobsurat. If you translate it into English, you get handsome boy. Again, the same formal correspondence, same pattern. The grammatical form is same. You have got boy as noun and then you have got handsome as the adjective. Again, adjective here preceding the noun. On the other hand, textual equivalent is defined as, I quote, any target language text or portion of text which is observed on a particular occasion to be equivalent of a given source language text or portion of text. For example, I will take another example, same thing, handsome boy. Now I will go to Arabic, maybe people may understand, some people. Waladun jamilun is its equivalent there. Waladun is ladka, jamilun is khoobsurat, handsome. So handsome boy, waladun jamilun. If you see here, there is no formal correspondence because in Arabic, it is the adjective noun coming first and then it is followed by the adjective. Whereas in handsome boy or khoobsurat ladka, you have got the noun being preceded by the adjective. So you will say in this example, you have got the formal correspondence is not there, but textual equivalence is there. While as in case of good boy versus khoobsurat ladka, you have both the formal correspondence as well as the textual equivalence. Now, there's another thing what he mentions in this continuity with the types of this rank. He says that if there is no formal equivalence, then there a shift occurs. Now, very important postulation by Catford as far as his theory is concerned. He defines shifts as departures from formal correspondence in the process of going from the source language to the target language. So formal correspondence comes in, that is the structure of the source language and the structure of the target language, they differ, and then the shift occurs. And he propounds two types of these shifts, namely level shifts, where the source language item at one linguistic level, for example, grammar, has a target language equivalent at a different level, for example, lexis. And then he talks about category shifts, which he gives different types of that, 4 types. One, structure shifts, which involve a grammatical change between the structure of the source text and that of the target text. As I said, Waladun Jamilun and handsome boy, there is structure shift here because of the placement, the position of the adjective. Then class shifts, when a source language item is translated with a target language item which belongs to a different grammatical class. That is, for example, a verb may be translated with a noun. You find examples sometimes like this. Then he talks about the unit shifts, which involve change in rank. And the final one, intra-system shifts, which occurs when source language and target language possess systems which approximately correspond formally as to their constitution, but when translation involves selection of a non-corresponding term in the target language. For example, you have got in the source language a singular word, while as when you translate it into the target language, it becomes plural. Then very important concept which he has dealt with in his theory is untranslatability. Untranslatability, by that he means the difficulty in translating certain lexical items, or maybe certain phrases or certain expressions or even sentences, translating from the source language into the target language. When the translator, he faces some difficulties in translating, and he categorizes this untranslatability into 2 main types. One, he calls them as linguistic untranslatability, and the second is what he calls as the cultural untranslatability. Now Catford defines linguistic untranslatability as, I quote him, failure to find a target language equivalent which is entirely due to differences between the source language and the target language, unquote. And you will see many examples you can abound when you translate. If you are a professional translator, you find ambiguity is there, polysemy is there, oligosemy is there, many examples. I will try to give some examples. Now see, polysemy occurs when a word has more than one meaning, 2 or more than one meanings. So for example, you have got English word bank and right. They are polysemous words. Now such words become untranslatable when more than one meaning of a particular word of these words becomes functionally relevant in the source language context. So if you have got the source language text, there you find word bank is there or right is there, and it gives both the meanings. It is ambiguous there, it is used ambiguously. This becomes a problem for the translator to translate into the target language. Does he find an equivalent there, a word which has both the meanings? So such type of, you can say, problems do arise, which is based on the linguistic aspects, linguistic reasons. Another instance of untranslatability occurs when there is oligosemy or restriction of meaning. For example, you have got English word friend. If I ask my audience, how can you translate friend into, for example, Urdu or Kashmiri? My friend Mohit Saab is living there. I believe most of us instantly may say, okay, in Urdu we may say those, but why not Saheli? So depends. Again, this is a problem. The oligosemy is there, that English word friend is not the equivalent of Urdu word Saheli, for example, as Saheli is oligosemous and can refer to a female friend only. Now you can take ambiguity at the higher level. Let me take a sentence I'll give, which I believe is relevant to the present COVID era. Visiting relatives can be a nuisance. Now this sentence, for example, it is ambiguous. It has got syntactic ambiguity. Now here, this sentence, if you, I give you, this is your source language text, you translate it into, for example, Urdu, you translate it into Hindi, you translate it into your own languages. I believe there will be problem. You will face some problem. Why? Because this sentence, it is ambiguous at the syntactic level. Sentential ambiguity is there. It has got at least two meanings. I will explain. Now, if you take visiting relatives as a subject, that is the relatives who visit you, they become a nuisance for you. And in second instance, you are asked by maybe your family, okay, go to the Falani's home, go to so-and-so's home. Now it becomes a problem for you, given the COVID, you have to wear a mask and other things. So you now are the subject, you visit relatives, it becomes a nuisance. So if this is to be translated, it has got what is called as linguistic untranslatability. So as a translator, you have to take care of, when you translate into your own language, into the target language, you have to take care of this linguistic untranslatability. You will definitely face linguistic untranslatability at a particular point of time anywhere. So this is one thing. And second, what he talks about is cultural untranslatability, which we should take into account as translators when we translate from one language into another language, because every language, I can say like this, that it is embedded in its own culture. Every language is embedded in its own culture, and there is deep association between language and culture. They are inseparable in one sense, and there are so many theories, and nobody will deny that the language and culture, they are inseparable units. So when the untranslatability arises due to cultural reasons, you have got a cultural item, you have got a cultural concept. So if the problem arises, that he calls as cultural untranslatability. And I will quote Catford. He says regarding the cultural untranslatability, I quote, when a situational feature functionally relevant for the source language text is completely absent from the culture of which the target language is a part, unquote. Now here, in cultural untranslatability, you have got three situations can arise, which you have to take into account. The cultural untranslatability, I can say, you can categorize it into three types. Number one, the first situation occurs when a term or a word in the source language does not have a corresponding referent in the target language, which performs the same function in the target language. For example, in some languages, there is no word for Kashmiri word sheen, barf, sheen, snow, and such a absence of such a phenomena then becomes outside the range of experience of their speakers, the target language speakers. Hence, it may be difficult to translate. We have a Kashmiri expression, we usually use it to, you can say, focus on the whiteness of some object. We say sheen hu safed, white as snow. So if the expression sheen is not present in that, you can say, target language, it becomes a problem to translate there. Now, however, it can happen that there may be a widely used equivalent to this phrase, which has a corresponding function in the target language. For example, there may be an expression like white as milk. So if you don't have expression of sheen or expression of snow in the target language, but if you have the equivalent, somehow equivalent, white as milk, so you can replace that sheen hu safed, white as snow, by white as milk. So that can be used as translation. This is then the translator's job to see into it, that what type of untranslatability is there. The second situation of cultural untranslatability arises when the referent in the source language is present in the target language. That is, it is present in both the languages, source language as well as the target language. The object is present in both the languages, source language and the target language. But when the referent in the source language is present in the target language, but has a different function to perform in the target language. For example, the word for, excuse me for using Kashmiri examples, being the native speaker of Kashmiri language, and then I have been translating myself. So these are the practical examples which I have faced. Now, for example, the word for liver or lungs in Kashmiri is, for liver, it is kranmaz, and for lungs, it is shush. Now, we use these words for endearment to our kids, particularly our women folk. They may say, if there is a kid and they allow him, he or she may say, Ichmion shush, he's my darling, or Ichmion kranmaz, he is my darling. Now, if you translate this Ichmion shush, literally, if I word by word say, it is like this, that he, and this is my, you can say lungs, he is my lungs. Now, if you translate it into English, it becomes he is my lungs, or he is my liver, Ichmion kranmaz. So this problem, now you see, the item is present both in the Kashmiri language as well as in English. I can come to Urdu and Hindi later. So both the objects are present, both the organs are present in both the languages, but we have got different cultural connotations of this grandmas and shush. We use it in a cultural context, typical, and we say Ishmeon shush, Ishmeon grandmas, but it becomes, if you have got a Kashmiri text which is to be translated into English, you will definitely face a problem. Now what you are going to do at that particular point of time. And in, for example, you can say Urdu, it becomes Ishmeon shush, ye mera fevda hai, not acceptable, but I believe Urdu and Hindi people, they say ye mera jigar hai. So the third type of, you can say, the third situation occurs when a term in the source language does not have a corresponding referent or any other referent with a parallel function in the target language. It doesn't have any, neither has it, the first situation you had got white as milk, neither has it the second situation, it's not present there. In such circumstances, what we do as translators, or what you should do, either you borrow the source language word or you use parataxis or what is called as the descriptive phases. For example, again, Kashmiri example, Kangri and Farron, we do use them in the severe winters. If they are translated into English, I have seen people translating them as, okay, fire pot, or as the gown, Farron as gown and Kangri as fire pot, but they are not giving that, you can say, connotation. They are not, have not that communicative effectivity what the words Kangri and Farron have. Now what we can do here as a translator, you can use the same words in the target language, that is English, but you have, may give in brackets or under footnotes, you may give their description or what I called as the parataxis. And you have but to highlight, because Kangri is not a word belonging to English, you will somehow highlight them by making it bold or by, you can say, italicizing it. To elaborate this point further, let me give, because I was giving examples only from Kashmiri, let me come to Urdu. There is a fiction work written by Abdus Samad, and it has been translated into English by Meher Faruqi. The title of is Khabon Ka Savera, and it has been translated as Dawn of Dreams. I am giving you one small para from this. I am quoting, I am reading from that book. Don't cry. Insha'Allah, we will meet again. When Surah Fatiha is recited in this manner, then separation is only temporary and dear ones are reunited. Don't cry. Your tears will darken our path. Pull yourself together. Have faith in God. Whatever He does for the best. He is surely the best judge of everything. Unquote. If you see here in the passage, the terms like Inshallah, Surah Fatiha are strikingly unfamiliar terms for English readers due to the cultural distance between the source language Urdu and the target language English. According to the translation strategy discussed earlier, you have to add some texts to explain what is Inshallah and what is Surah Fatiha. What I want to say here is that as a translator, you will face the problems and you will have to tackle these problems at the linguistic level as well as at the cultural level. Then coming to the second theory is Eugene Naida's theory, very important American linguist and a translation theorist. He has written extensively on translation. He was a practical translator also. He has done tremendous work as far as Bible translation is concerned, translating Bible into different world languages. He was president of Bible Society in America, and he was, by profession, he was a linguist also. He has contributed a lot as far as translation theory is concerned, and he developed his theory in his paper titled Science of Translation, which was published in a famous linguistic journal Language way back in 1969. And then he has written extensively. There are hundreds of papers and many books towards the science of translating, the theory and practice of translation, language structure and translation context. And in translating, they are the primary books if somebody wants to read Naida's theory. Now, what is important about Naida's theory is that it moves from semantic theory of translation to a pragmatic one. Pragmatic, semantics and pragmatic. Semantics we take, you can say it is related to the world, you can say representational, while as pragmatics, the context comes into play. Now, and it shifts from you can say, semantic theory to the pragmatic one, and then he accounts for the implied meanings. And he makes a distinction between referential or denotative meaning and the emotive or connotative meaning. Now here, what I want to say is that as a translator, when you find a word, you have to, what neither advocates is that you have to see, is it the denotative meaning, what I can call as dictionary meaning, is it the dictionary meaning which is involved, or is there the associational meaning, additional meaning, which a word or an expression takes place, as I gave the example, grandma's example from Kashmiri. It is the additional meaning which has got associated with that due to our culture. Now, in his book, The Theory and Practice of Translation, he defines translation as, I quote him, translating consists in reproducing in the receptor language the closest natural equivalent of the source language message, first in terms of meaning and secondly in terms of style. If you see this definition, some terms need, one is reproducing. He doesn't use the word producing, he's saying reproducing, because you have got already the source language text available with you. The translator has got the source language text, he has to reproduce it. And then he uses the term equivalence. I will come to that later. We have discussed the textual equivalence of Catford, but I will talk about equivalence as discussed by Naida also. Then he says the closest natural equivalent. By natural, he means that it is somehow focused to, you can say, the receptor language. It should be the natural, you can say, diction, the natural words, the natural phrases. You should take it as close. It should not seem artificial. It should seem natural to the reader of the target language. And then he says that closest natural equivalent, closest, remember, closest natural equivalent. When he uses the term closest, it somehow implies that 100% equivalence is not possible. But as a translator, your job is to try to bring it as close as possible. And when we talk about the natural, it points to the receptor language. Now remember, he doesn't use the term target language, he uses the term receptor language. He has replaced the term target with receptor because he focuses on the readers, he focuses on the receivers of the target language. And then he gives, you can say, model how to translate. For him, translation comprises of 3 stages. If you are translating a text, he advocates that you have to pass through 3 stages. What are those? They are, number 1, analysis, number 2, transfer, and restructuring. Now I will try to briefly talk about them. The first one, text analysis. It is a basic part of, as far as translation is concerned, because a translator, he has to interpret the source language text first. So he has to analyze the text, then only he can move forward. And at this level, he utilized the terminology of great linguist Noam Chomsky, the surface structure, etc. So he said that kernel sentences, the basic sentences, and he said that the surface structure of the source language text should be analyzed in terms of sentential and suprasentential features. And here he takes into, he further says that you can take 3 categories here. Number 1, you try to identify the grammatical relationship between the constituent parts. Number 2, the referential meaning of the units. Number 3, the connotative meaning, which I was discussing just now, that he differentiated between the referential meaning and the connotative meaning. Now, as far as this grammatical, the first one, grammatical analysis is concerned, here, what happens is that the arrangement of words is also very important. Grammatical, that how you arrange the words. The arrangement of words in larger constructions does affect the meaning of the construction. For example, the man ran after the dog versus the dog ran after the man. Active and passive, you can say something like that, or not active and passive, sorry. The man ran after the dog. Your same words are there in both the sentences. The man ran after the dog ran after the man. It is simply change of, you can say, order, bringing man to the first and taking dog to the last, and in the second one, bringing dog. So if you just change 1 or 2 words, the meaning gets totally changed. The man ran after the dog versus the dog ran after the man. Similarly, the grammatical category of words is also very significant. You have to see the grammatical category and try to find out. We can use what the traditional modes, what we say that the parts of speech, etc., etc. And here you will have to identify that how this word, what is the part of speech, how it is used. For example, I will give you the word stone. This stone, when it comes, it will, most of the time it comes into our mind, it creates the image of noun, but it can be used as noun, it can be used as verb, it can be used as adjective. So that's the analysis, go for the analysis. Now as noun, for example, he threw a stone at him, and as verb, they stoned him, and as adjective, he is stone deaf. Now coming to the semantic analysis, the referential meaning. As I said, referential meaning is the denotative meaning. What we can somehow say, it is that meaning which pertains to the word, it is that meaning which pertains to the dictionary. So here he advocates neither that you should do the semantic analysis right from every unit, morpheme up to the words, up to the idioms, and then he says that you should delimit the meaning of these words, and delimit the meaning of these, you can say, linguistic items which are involved. Now he says the delimitation can be done in two ways. One, the syntactic structure may clearly mark the difference of meaning. It is again the grammatical structure, the syntactic structure, which will give you the meaning, for example, of the word, or you can say overall the sentence, she drank water versus she will water the plants. See the use of water in the two. In the first, it is used as noun, as I was saying, the grammatical analysis, and in the second, it is the water is used as the verb. Now second, that meaning cannot be determined grammatically, but it can be determined semantically. Now I will take example of the word run. Now run, everybody, we say in Urdu, we can say dodna. Now most of the time we say he ran, something like that, but run has got different shades of meaning. As a translator, you will have to see that this word, maybe does it have the same only one meaning, or maybe it has got different shades of meaning. Let me just, I will give one example and 2-3 examples. He runs very fast. He runs very fast. It is run here is showing the pedal movement. The second example, the water ran into the tub. He runs very fast. The water ran into the tub. Now here it is the flow. So although the basic meaning, remember, basic meaning is same of run in all these, but the shades of meaning vary. So here it is the flow, and the third one, the line runs over the flow. Now here the shade of meaning is the extension. So for this, if you find such type of words, he then advocated what we call components and analysis. We say that the componential analysis, says that you break down words into different components. For example, the word boy, you can see its meaning in Urdu or Hindi, okay, ladka, but we can break down it into that it is plus adult, it is plus noun, it is plus human, and it is plus masculine. While as girl, for example, plus adult, plus noun, plus human, but minus masculine, that is feminine. So he analyzed and said that componential analysis should be used, and he did use it, and people have been using it when they translate from source language into the target language. And by components, he then gives an analogy also. He says that, for example, you have to travel from Srinagar to Jammu, and you will definitely take along with you clothing, you may take the brush and other things, whatever things are necessary for you. Now he says that when the person reaches Jammu, what matters is that the items have reached safe and sound to Jammu. It is immaterial for him that what was the carrier. Was it a bag? Was it an attaché? Was it a suitcase? Whatever. Similarly, at this level, you have to take into account other categories like synonymy, antonymy, etc. Then he talks about the connotative meaning. We are talking about analysis, remember. So now coming to connotative meaning, that you have got the words which have maybe the fixed meaning, what is the dictionary meaning, or the denotative meaning, but sometimes the additional meaning, what I can call as associative meaning, additional meaning gets associated to a particular item in a particular context, in a particular society, in a particular culture. So as a translator, you will have to take into account that if this word, does it have only the denotative meaning is involved there, or the source language text, it has also utilized what is called as connotative meaning. For example, let me talk about the word fundamentalist. Fundamentalist, it seems so innocuous word, but the connotations which have been given to that he is a fundamentalist, you can well understand. So you will have to take into account. Or you see, for example, green color in Islamic culture, we take it it is a symbolic, it has got religious symbolism. So saffron, for example, again, saffron, simply an innocuous color, but again, we have got, okay, saffronization, we use the term. And in Kashmiri culture, there's a very, it was innocuous word before militancy, the word mukbir. Simply, mukbir meant that the person who gave the information, but given the context here, it has got its connotation, connotative meaning is totally different. So when you are translating, you have to take into that thing into account, that is it the denotative meaning or is it the connotative meaning. Then he talks the second stage, as I said, was the first one was analyze the text. Second one, he said that transfer. What he meant by transfer is that he told that it is in the mind, that you have to, when you analyze, you take it into the mind at the basic structure, at the surface structure. He used the term kernel level of Chomsky. So he said that you have to take it into mind, think about that, and then you have to go. Same example I will take. For example, you have got friend of English. You have got the source text English, and the word you encounter is friend, and you have to translate it into, for example, Kashmiri, into, for example, Hindi or Urdu. Now, you will think in your mind, take it in your mind that I have to translate it into, now gender will come play. Is it the male or is it the female? Then after doing it in your mind, then he talks that the final stage of translation is restructuring. Structuring and restructuring. Remember, he also used the term reproducing in his definition. So restructuring, you have to restructure it. You have to create a new structure using the target language resources, using the linguistic resources of the target language, using the lexicon, the grammar, the phonology of the target language. And when he talks about restructuring, he means by it that it is rewriting or redrafting the message of the source language text in the target language by using the target language resources. Now, here again, he talks about that there are two levels which you should, as translator, take into account. One, he calls that it is the functional level, and another he calls as the formal level. Formal coming from, you can say the word, I will move further, that the formal level here needs to identify the stylistic level at which restructuring should take place. And usually we have got three levels which we take into account here, or he talks about those, is formal, informal, and technical. Formality, informal situation or false. So if you have got, for example, a formal text and you are translating it into the target language, the formality should be maintained. That's what he advocates. If you are translating informal text, the informality should be maintained. And the second dimension, the functional dimension, he says that the formal dimension here, it involves the literary genre. What type of genre is involved? You have got different types of, particularly in literature, you have got epic poetry, for example, you have got travelogues, you have got poems, you have got proverbs, etc., etc., you have got narratives. Now here, you will have to take into consideration what sort of text it is, what is its genre. For example, let me quote that epic and didactic poetry, they are very popular in Asian countries, many parts of Asia, but they are not frequently, rather very rarely used as far as the Western world is concerned. So here again, you will have to take into consideration how to go about, if you are translating an epic poem, or if you are translating some didactic poetry, then you have to take into account the Western, you can say, norms and Western milieu. And then the final one, he says that besides that, you have to take another dimension into account, what he calls as the dynamic or functional dimension. It is related in many respects to impact. Here, the role of the receptor is crucial. Receptor, as I said right in the beginning, he uses the term receptor, is the reader. So what he says that here, the role of receptor is crucial because translation can be treated as advocate only if the response of the intended receptor is satisfactory. That is, you have to find the receptor, you have to focus on the receptor. He should feel satisfied, he should appreciate your translated work. Now, the success of translation, as per Nugin, neither depends on the response of the receptor. Now, another very important, as I was saying, the equivalence, the notion of dynamic equivalence, and he makes a distinction between formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. By formal equivalence, he says that it correspondence focuses attention on the message itself in both form and content, form, structure, and content, unlike dynamic equivalence, which is based upon the principle of equivalent effect on the receptor who reads it. Now, 1 minute. Eugene Naida's formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence are important, as he points out that formal equivalence translation is basically source-oriented. He points out, I quote, such a formal equivalence is basically source-oriented, that is designed to reveal as much as possible of the form and content of the original message. So you are, you can say, focusing on the source language here, the form and content of the source language. On the other hand, in dynamic equivalence, he says, I quote, the focus of attention is directed not so much toward the source message as towards the receptor response, as he used the term effect. Now, so response of the receptor comes into focus here. And in his definitions of this dynamic equivalence, he also talks about the closest natural equivalent to the source language message in his definition. That is, the message of the original text should be transported into the receptor language such that the response of the receptor is essentially like that of the original receptors. It means that translated text should reflect the original text as perfect as possible in a different language structure, what he had called as the closest natural equivalent. This was about Naida's theory, and the last one I will touch. I believe I'm not short of time, Professor Ashu.
So,
should I continue?
Yeah, you can continue for another 10-15 minutes. Then we have to take up the queries as well. So, you have to take up the queries as well.
Okay, no issues. Okay, then let me talk about Peter Newmark's theory. Newmark's theory is discourse and receptor oriented. Here I will talk about discourse. Let me tell that up to the 1970s, the linguistic studies mostly focused up to the level of the sentence, but after that, they said that we should go beyond the sentence and we should focus on the discourse. Discourse means that, for example, when you are talking for a particular point of time and you go beyond the sentences, many sentences are spoken or there is a conversation, etc. So Van Dijk and others, they talked about the discourse. Now his main contribution is categorization of translation into two types. One he calls as semantic translation and another he calls as communicative translation. Now the semantic translation, it focuses upon the semantic content of the source text. Go back to semantics and you can say connotative meaning, semantic meaning and connotative meaning. Now communicative translation focuses upon the comprehension and response of the receptors. In this regard, Newmark writes, I quote, communicative translation attempts to produce on its readers an effect as close as possible to that obtained on the readers of the original. Semantic translation attempts to render as closely as the semantic and syntactic structures of the second language allow the exact contextual meaning of the original, unquote. This categorization by Newmark resembles that of Naida's dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence, but differs in the principle of absolute equivalence as was demanded by Naida. Newmark is of the opinion that the effect is inoperant if the text is out of the target language space and time. That is, the communicative translation, it attempts to produce on its readers an effect as close as possible to that obtained on the readers of the original. Again, focuses on the effect. It means that communicative translation focuses on the reader, aiming at making the text more native and original. Now Newmark, when he talks about these two types, he has categorized, he has given a list, he has given a chart of various features belonging to, you can say, the semantic translation as well as the communicative translation. It will take enough time, but I will highlight some of the features which he has highlighted and comparing both of them. Now in semantic translation, he says that it is author-centered, while as in communicative translation, he says it is reader-centered. The semantic translation, he says, it pursues author's thought process related to thought, while as communicative translation pursues author's intention related to speech. The semantic translation, in semantic translation, semantic and syntactic oriented, it is semantic and syntactic oriented. That is, the length of sentences, position and integrity of clauses, word positions, etc. They are preserved whenever possible. While as the communicative translation, it is effect oriented. That is, the formal features of original are sacrificed more readily. Further point that he talks about the semantic translation, that it is faithful and more literal, while as communicative translation, he says it is faithful but freer. In case of semantic translation, he says it is informative, while as communicative translation, it is effective, again the effect. And the semantic translation, it is personal, while as communicative translation, it is social. Another point which I would like to highlight, that he says in case of semantic translation, the translator has no right to improve or to correct. In semantic translation, the translator has no right to improve or to correct, while as in communicative translation, the translator has the right to correct and improve the logic and style of the original, clarify ambiguities, jargons, normalize bizarre usage, etc. Then in semantic translation, the focus is on meaning, while as in communicative translation, the focus is on message. Now, one more point I will highlight and then I will move further, that the semantic translation, it is semantic and syntactic oriented. The length of sentences, positions, and integrity of clauses, that is has to be preserved wherever possible. But in case of the communicative translation, you can say ignore those things. Now, Newmark, he distinguishes between semantic and pragmatic meanings of a unit. You have got a word, you have got a sentence, for example. He says that it may have the semantic meaning and the pragmatic meaning. He uses the term semantic meaning and pragmatic meaning. The denotative or dictionary meaning is the semantic meaning, while as, thank you. Excuse me. The semantic meaning, it is the dictionary meaning or the denotative meaning, while as the pragmatic meaning is given by the context. Pragmatics means that it is a use of language in context. When you use a word or a sentence or whatever, you use that in a particular context. Now consider the word, you will excuse me for using the word, but I am bound because this is a proper example. Consider the word gadha. Now, if you take its semantic meaning is simply as the quadruped animal, which you can see, while as the connotative meaning, you and me understand better if you tell somebody that dekho wo gadha hai. Now, we can invoke the distinction between utterance meaning and speaker meaning also here, because the speaker meaning and the utterance meaning, that is very important as far as the pragmatic meaning is concerned. Now, utterance meaning is the literal meaning of a sentence. As we are saying, the semantic meaning and pragmatic meaning. Semantic meaning is the denotative meaning or the dictionary meaning, and pragmatic meaning is given by the, you can say, context. While as utterance meaning, it is, we are moving from word to the level of sentence. Now, you have here utterance meaning and the speaker meaning. Here, the intended meaning comes into play. Now, the utterance meaning is the literal meaning of a sentence, while as the speaker meaning is the intended meaning of the speaker or the text. Again, consider the expression, the source language text, for example, dekho gadha peshab kar raha hai. Now, if you see, its semantic meaning will be simply be that the concerned animal is urinating. You show to a kid that, see, the donkey is urinating there. So, dekho gadha peshab kar raha hai. But it is, you can say, intended meaning. You can see, if you see it written on some wall, usually on some walls you will see written written that dekho gadha peshab kar raha hai. And if you see in a wall, the context changes and the meaning, you can easily get the intended meaning or the pragmatic meaning becomes totally different. It is totally, you can say, opposite to it is semantic meaning. So a translator here has to be quite watchful. He has to be quite, you can say, careful when he's translating the source language text to the target language text. He has to take into account the maybe the intended meaning of the author also. That is it simply the literal meaning, or is there some indirect meaning is involved. Now, this Peter Newmark's categorization of translation into semantic and communicative translation envisages a close relationship between the different text types which have been explored by him. So he then moves further. He talks about the types of text which influence the translation. His classification, he classifies the text into three main types, what he calls as expressive, informative, and vocative. This classification of text into these expressive, informative, and vocative is very crucial in differentiating between the semantic and communicative contexts. That's very important there. This categorization basically is based on Kalbural's model of language functions. Kalbural, he has given three functions, primary functions of language, what he calls as expressive, then second, informative or representational, and the third one he calls as vocative or conative. The expressive function, in expressive function, the language is oriented towards the self, that is the speaker. For example, the poems, they are mostly expressive, while as in vocative, language is oriented towards the reader. The language is oriented towards the addressee. For example, advertisements, political speeches, sermons, you are focusing on, you try to motivate, you try to persuade, you try to change the behavior or opinion of your audience, of your hearer. Then the informative function, in informative function, language is oriented towards the rest of the reality. That is anything other than the speaker or the addressee. That is what I can say, the message or the information. For example, technical reports, scientific texts, newspapers, they are having it is the informative function which is predominant. In this backdrop, Newmark, he differentiates then between two types of translation, literary and non-literary. Now here he makes a distinction. He categorizes the text, literary translation, that you have to take into account the literary texts, and others, other than literature, he calls them as non-literary texts. In non-literary translation, the information function will be dominant, while as in the literary translation, expressive function is the most dominant. In other words, Newmark proposes that the nature of text has to be taken into consideration during translation. That is, he also focuses on the type of the text. For example, you have got different types of texts. You can say you have got literary text, you have got a technical text, you may have a religious text that is to be translated, and you have to take into consideration. Now see, for example, if you take into consideration the religious text, you have to be, you can say, very careful while translating the religious text, because simple error, simple mistake will land you in trouble. So you have to be very cautious about the choice of words, about the choice of sentences. However, he also makes it clear that different types of translation cannot be put in watertight compartments. It only means that one of the functions is predominant in a text, and that needs to be taken into account. For example, in advertisements, the vocative function is predominant because it is directed towards the audience, it is directed towards the viewers, it is directed towards the listeners, but you won't say that the information or informative function is absent there, but one of the functions is, you can say, dominant. So he says that you can't make some watertight compartmentalization. I will give one example. There is a again, Khabun Ka Savera, as I said perhaps earlier also, that it is the fiction in Urdu. It has been translated into English by Meher Faruqi. Now let me see just one para. He says, "Aisa laga," one sentence, "Aisa laga jaise sabke haathon ke tote achanak ud gaye." Haathon ke tote achanak ud gaye. Now he has translated, it has been translated into English by Faruqi as "Suddenly everything was over." Now if you see, "Haathon ke tote ud gaye," suddenly everything was over, I believe the communicative dimension of the tote ud gaye has not been captured in the expression what Faruqi has used, "Suddenly everything was over." Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor Rashi.
Thank you very much, Professor Ejaz. Before we conclude, we have certain pertinent queries to be answered. You can take a breather. I can see it was a really exhaustive session. Then we can Shall we begin with the queries, sir?
Yes, of course.
All right, thank you. So one of the pertinent question which was put forth by one of the participants is, it is often said that poetry dies when translated. So how far do you agree with this statement? Can we translate poetry? Yeah.
There is a famous quotation perhaps by Fitzgerald. He says that poetry is that which is lost in translation. Yes, if you see, for example, there are, as I touched about untranslatability. And if you see many persons who have translated, they say that poetry is untranslatable. But still then, you can say there are so many things which are involved. For example, you have what, if you take Ghalib, if you take Faz in Urdu, and you are translating it into English, for example. Now see, every language, it has got its own, what I can call as genius, its own linguistic genius. It is phonology, unique phonology, it is morphology, it is syntax, it is grammar, and it is lexis, which I discussed here in my presentation also. But having said that, yes, for example, you have got the musicality, which may be present due to the original phonemes, the assonance, the consonants, the rhythm, the rhyme, which may be present there due to what we can say that it is because of the original phonological structure of the source language. And maybe usually this symphony, this musicality does get lost when you translate it into another language. For example, as I said, Faz and Ghalib, if you take their poetry very melodious, if you translate them into English, this part will definitely be lost. But then comes the message part. That won't be lost. It depends then on the, you can say, translator, how far he is able. And then there is a term, transcreation, we use. Free translation is also there, that you take the message and then it depends on the translator how far he is able then to reproduce the same effect of what Naida and Newmark talk about. And it depends on his expertise, it depends on his craft, how he utilizes the, you can say, linguistic resources of his own language. I do agree that symphony and other things, musicality, they will be lost, but it may happen sometimes, it does happen. I have seen some poems from Kashmiri having been translated into English, that when you feel, if you don't read the Kashmiri version, you feel that this English one is very good. It seems natural. The natural, what he said, that closest natural equivalent. So having said that, it depends on the translator, and even seeing those linguistic untranslatability or other factors involved, there has been no stopping the translators from translating literature and particularly the poetry.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. You very lucidly explained it as well. Now, coming to another concept, which is partial translation and partial and impartial translation, mentioned by you. So, how far is it different from transcreating? While translating, of course, some part of the meaning would not be retained in the source text, in the target text, which was exhibited in the source text. Of course, that is acceptable. But then, what is transcreating? How is it different from translating? If we accept and we are okay with the fact that some part of it is not going to be retained when it is recreated. So what is transcreation and how is it different from translation?
You see, first coming to, I didn't use the term partial and impartial. Basically, when I was discussing Catford, I said that he has given 6 types and they are on the basis of level, rank, and I discussed that on the basis of extent. He talks about 2 types, total versus partial. Now here it is not, you can say, leave aside other aspects, the creativity and other things. Here it is the, you can say, extent, or you can say the quantity or the text which you are translating. By total translation, he meant that whatever you are going to translate, if it is a, for example, one sentence, I gave the sentence, I remember there, that give me your book. Now, if I take this as the, you can say, my text, and I'm to translate it into Urdu. So if I don't leave any word, untranslated, then it is what he called as total translation. You have got one para, you start right from the first word until the last word. You don't leave any source language word untranslated. You replace it by the words or by the language of the target language. That is what he meant by the total translation. While as in partial translation, he said that you leave some part, maybe one word, as I gave the example, mujhe apni kitab do. If I translate it like, uh, sorry, give me your book. If I translate it like, mujhe apni kitab do, so I am doing total translation because I have translated all the words. But if I say, mujhe apni book do, I am doing partial translation. That is the word book I retained from the source language. Now coming to what you are talking about, the transcreation, I touched it briefly in the first answer also, that you see transcreation, it is basically the amalgamation. Basically it came first in, can say, the business translations. Now it is a combined word of translation and creation. Translation, forget about it for the time being. Translation, we understand you have got the source language text and you translate it into the target language. This term mostly was first used, as I said, in business translations, and now it is frequently used in literature also. Now, the term creativity, I will like to highlight. You have got creativity not in terms of, you can say, the linguistic text. Creativity in sense of this, that you see, you have got a poet. Now, Ghalib or whoever, you take, okay, Rabindranath Tagore, whoever he is, or a literary person, Salman Rushdie, okay, and Nepal or Mulkraj Anand, when they give you some literary artifact, this is, in one sense, creativity. Creativity has got two meanings here, what I would like to touch. Now, creation, let me come to the word creation. We said that God created the world. He created it from nothing. There was nothing before that, and he created something. Similarly, if you take any poem, any short story, any novel, it was non-existent before that. Now, it was created by some particular writer, a particular author. That is one aspect of creativity. Second is creativity in terms of the use of linguistic resources, that you somehow manipulate. That is allowed in literature. That's not allowed in what you can call as the non-literary language. You see, I remember, I'm not, I forget the poet, unfathering, unchilding deeps has been used. Unchilding, unfathering deeps. If you see, this is totally ungrammatical, but given the context of the poem, it talks about that, I can say, destruction of the ship, and unchilding, that there were some persons who lost their childs, and unfathering, and there were some persons who lost their fathers. The grammatical rules have been applied of English. It is a negative one. Tie, untie, so unchild, and ing, you know, smile, smiling, unchilding, and unfathering. So creativity in that sense also, that is utilized in literature, that is utilized particularly in poetry. Now, what happens in transcreation is that the person, it is somehow free translation. The person, somehow up to that, the person, or what this Newmark talks about, communicative translation. The person here, he forgets about the form, he forgets about other things. He simply takes the message from the author. What is his message? And then he tries to recreate it. There may be even sometimes, as Newmark said, that he is free there. He can add and delete. So he tries to recreate it in a new form. He tries to remodel it. He tries to restructure it and giving it a totally new shape, so that it seems it is totally new creation in the target language. Hope you got the answer.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Very much. Totally convinced by your explanation. Before I trouble you with another query, I think you should take a breather, since you've been speaking since long and it has been a really exhaustive session for you. The next question is, it is also a very particular and very pertinent concept which you talked about, textual equivalence.
Just, you will, 1 minute,
Yeah.
excuse me, I want to relax a bit. Just, okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you. So textual equivalence. Do you think it is possible to attain textual equivalence in the case of translating expressions from the source text to the target?
Sorry, please repeat the second part.
Right. I mean, do you think it is possible to attain textual equivalence while translating expressions of the source language into target language. We're not talking about words, we're not talking about sense, we're talking about the expressions only, right? Every particular language has certain peculiar expressions attached to it. So how do we find a parallel between the source language and the target language in case of translating those expressions?
You see, if you go, let me go back. I believe all the three theories. Yes, just excuse me. All the three theories which I talked, they are relevant again here. Now, if you see the motions of textual equivalence by Catford, then you have got dynamic equivalence by Neither. When it comes to translating, if you see the definition given by Neither itself, he said that closest natural equivalent. And I mentioned at that point of time that it is implied when he uses the term closest natural equivalent. Closest natural equivalent. So he says that as a translator, my job, your job as a translator is to try to bring it as close as possible. When he says the closest equivalent, that means it is implied. He says that yes, 100% equivalence is not possible. And that is what I have discussed due to the linguistic facts, that is due to the cultural facts, which I discussed or which Catford has rightly discussed under the headings of linguistic untranslatability and the cultural untranslatability. Having said that, again, every language has got its own genius. It has got its own, you can say, lexical resources. It has got its own grammatical resources. It has got its own phonological resources. So in that sense, yes, you will see. But there are some, and again, let me go back to Catford when he talks about the, you can say, textual equivalence. You see, he said that you are replacing, in terms of textual equivalence, you are replacing the source language text with the target language text, equivalent grammar and equivalent lexicon, because you are using the equivalent of the word of the source language by the equivalent word in the target language. Equivalent grammar here by equivalent grammar there. But non-equivalent phonology and graphology, because phonology at the phonological level and the graphological level, there may be difference. That's why he uses there the terms non-equivalent. I gave the example, for example, of English and Urdu and Hindi. If I say same thing, mujhe kitab de do. Now see, you translate it into English as give me your book. So there is equivalence maybe at the lexical level, there may be equivalence at the grammatical level, but there is not equivalence at the script level or graphological level, as well as at the phonological level. And having said that, yes, there are issues in translation, but still we do continue with it, and it has played a role. And yes, we say particularly in literature, maybe again, the text comes in, nature of the text comes into play. Now you have got scientific texts, you have got different types of text, maybe news papers. If you take, you can say legal text, you will take. There are, every text has got its own limitation, it has got its own features. Now coming to literary text or religious text, they have got their own features. So depends on the nature of the text also, that how much maybe scientific texts you may be more equivalent rather than in the literary text, because in literary text, again, there may be the intended meaning, you have got the figures of speech. Literary language, you know, it has got symbolic value, it has got connotative value, it is fiction based. So many things, and there maybe even we say it is open-ended, and there may be problems that you may say that it is 100% textual equivalence is not possible there. But as a translator, my job is as a translator to bring it as close as possible. And that's why, if you see, I mentioned about the componential analysis of this Eugene Naida. He says that try to break the words. I gave the examples of run. You see, run has got different shades. Or you can say the word friend. Friend, you are translating it into Urdu. If there is the female friend, you have to use Saheli. If it is the male friend, you may use those. So he said that the componential analysis will determine that there is the feature of masculinity, it is present in one and it is absent in another. So that you will have to take into consideration, and that's why he uses the componential analysis model to make that what I gave the example going from Srinagar to you can say Jammu. He said that what am I bothered about, what am I concerned about is that the same items should reach there. regardless of in what you took it in a cloth, you wrap it up in a cloth, you send it in a bag, or you put it in a trunk, etc., etc. So that is, I believe.
Thank
Okay,
you,
over
sir.
to.
Thank you, sir. Thoroughly convinced by your elaborate explanation. Now, there is an often quoted, often asked question by the participants, which I need to put forth. Do you think these linguistic theories, in a way, bind the translator? Do you think that they kill the creativity of the translator? Or do you think the theories do justice in guiding the translator? What is the role of theories actually? Is it positive, or is it a sort of restrictive implication which they have on the creativity of the translator?
You see, this is again, if you go back to, if you are particular about linguistic theories or the broader overall theories, I didn't get. Are you talking only about linguistic theories, or you are talking about broadly the theories? Professor Rasho?
There, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Are you talking about the linguistic theories only, or the overall the theories?
The linguistic theories which are applicable on translation, right?
Okay. You see, as I rightly said in the beginning also, that I know that there are people who deny that linguistics has any role in translation, or leave aside the, you can say, the theories. Okay, but having said that, if you see from an unprejudiced and unbiased manner, linguistics is a discipline which talks about languages. We analyze language at different levels. We have got, you can say, so many disciplines, and it is interdisciplinary also. We have got so many, you can say, nuances, how we can analyze. We believe, I would say that it restricts, it helps. It may be an additional tool to a person. Okay, come on, a philosopher or a literary translator. Now, it can help him in a better way. I will give one example. You can say, see, Dylan Thomas, he uses the term agripago. It is not related to translation. I will say that how the linguists can help, or how the translation, linguistic theories of translation can help. Agripago, if you see grammatically, if you go English grammar, English rules, you can say it is what we call as deviation from norm. It is ungrammatical in one sense, because you have got the normal pattern, the normal, can say, conjugation is a week ago, a second ago, a day ago, a night ago, a month ago, etc., etc. But he uses a grief ago. Ago is used, you understand better that it is used with the time expressions. A grief ago. So some person, he measures, you can say, his days and his life in terms of the griefs. Now, I, as a linguist, I can explain this in one, I believe, in a better way, by analyzing. See, this is the article. The article should come with a countable noun, a book, a phone, a pen, etc. And ago should come with a, you can say, time expression, week, month, etc., etc. So in that way, it will help. Similarly, when it comes to the linguistic theories, you see, for example, if you go deep into Naida's theory, he gives you the, you can say, model also. He talks about the text analysis, the transfer, and then the restructuring. In text analysis, you see, it is just 1 hour, and this Naida's theory, if you see, he has written so much about it. 3-4 books which only deal with this particular theory, and then he has got full chapters when we talk about the text analysis, how to analyze the text. And I believe if any person, leave aside the linguist, a non-linguist also, if he reads how he should, as a translator, he should analyze the text, I believe it will add to his, we can say, this translating ability, rather than diminish it. Then he talks about the restructuring, leave aside transfer. It is some of scientific. Coming to restructuring, he talks about the efficacy, he talks about the genres, he talks about what are the ways, which I couldn't discuss here, what are the ways how you can restructure this source language after analysis into the target language. So I believe, personally also, not being a student of linguist, I believe, I myself doing translation, I believe I have been benefited a lot by this, you can say, theories of translation or the linguistic insights. So it will add to the person. I believe it will not diminish it. It will not, you can say, reduce, it will not decrease his capability. It will increase his capability. And then again, it comes to the debate what people have been talking about, that is translation a science, is translation an art, is it a craft? So it comes to that also, that varies from person to person.
Thank you, sir. So, thank you very much for your elaborate, as usual, elaborate and illuminating explanation, which brings us to the very level where we actually feel like the beginners, like it is very encouraging for the beginners to understand these basic concepts, which you are giving up in such a simple language, very layman language you use. And so, as a culminatory exercise, I would expect you to give names of certain books on linguistic theories, which could cater to the Western as well as the Indian texts. So kindly do that, because there are some of our participants have been asking for the names of the books.
So I will send you. I will you can say email you, or I will you can say send on the WhatsApp.
Okay.
And okay. I will send definitely a list of, you can say, the basic books starting with, and even the recent ones. No issues. And if any person wants to, you can give my email also. I am, you can say, more than welcome. I will be more than happy to help, and you can say encourage. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for an extensively elaborative session on various theories of translation. You've talked at length on various intricate concepts like textual equivalence, partial and impartial translation, connotative and denotative meaning, in the basic layman's language by quoting simplest possible examples. We are indebted to you for your simplicity, sir. And of course, as organizers of the program, we do acknowledge the special efforts you've put in order to reach to a place with better internet connectivity. Highly grateful to you, sir. Thank you for your special effort.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thanks. It's a pleasure. Dear participants, this brings us to the culmination of day 2 of the International Workshop on Language Translation Skills. So let's call it a day now, and the same time we'll have technical session for tomorrow. The link shall be shared in the same manner as it was shared today. For the second day, we'll be sending you the links through your mails. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, everyone.